Hi, my name is Callie, and in the last video, I showed you how I spent a 9-hour layover in London and revealed that I would be heading toward my final destination of Cairo, Egypt. This video is a continuation of that series, so keep watching to see how I spent my business trip to Cairo, Egypt, and what we did in our free time. We landed in Cairo around 2 in the morning, and after finding our driver, we made our way out of the airport and headed to the hotel. This is also when I had my first taste of what it's like to drive in Cairo, and even at almost 3 a.m. in the morning, there was a very surprising amount of traffic on the road. So the next day we slept in a bit and then planned to do some shopping. Here's the outfit I wore on our first day. And also here is the view from our hotel room. We ended up having a very nice hotel we could stay at. I also want to note the traffic sound in the background. I'm just not used to the amount of honking and noise you hear constantly 24/7 in Egypt. So that took me a while to get used to. And here's a little sample of what it sounds like every hour of the day in Cairo. So we decided to catch an Uber, and our Uber driver was great. He was jamming out. And then we explored a market. The size of this market was crazy to me. It felt like a maze, and it just kept going on and on forever. But it was really fun to shop, and we did some haggling, and I was able to get some souvenirs from a couple of different shops. And then we decided to get some lunch. And as we were ordering, we were greeted by some resident street cats. We also realized that the road the restaurant was sitting on was a route for tour buses to go through. So we saw this tour bus turning in the distance and thought, surely it's not coming down this street right where we're sitting. It was, but it only came within a few inches of us. And then we got our food. And we did a bit more shopping and walking around. Here's a mosque that was right next to the market. And this is just one of the many entrances to this market. And here's the street front view of the main area of the market entrance. We quickly came to realize that as we went to order a new Uber to leave the market, it is nearly impossible to get an Uber to stop to pick you up from this area because it's so high traffic. We struggled so much that eventually a shopkeeper took pity on us and was able to work out a deal with the taxi driver for us. And he did actually work out a good deal for us, and we did make it back to our hotel without having to pay any extra other than what we agreed upon. So after all of that excitement, we decided to call it a day, as we were also still very jet lagged. Here's just some views you can see as you drive through Cairo. We enjoyed a beer by the pool and called it a day. For our second day in Cairo, it was another free day. We had planned a lot more activities for this day. I met my boss downstairs bright and early. Here's me riding the elevator down. And then we took an Uber over to the Egyptian Museum. At the time, this was September 2023, and they were actually in the process of moving most of the items in this museum to a newer, more modern building that they had built. Not everything that we could have seen was here at the time because they had already moved it to the new museum, but it was still a really cool way to get an idea of some important historical moments within Egypt's history. And we did not get up early enough to beat the tour traffic, so we did have to wait in a rather long line to get into the museum. Because the museum was so packed, we actually decided to do a tour guide option. We did not know this was an option until we were literally about to walk in and this man approached us. He said he was an official certified tour guide, and he did show us his certification, and he gave us a really good price to give us a private tour through the museum. I was very skeptical at first, but it turns out this is a real thing. It's just they are certified through the museum and they are legitimate. And I would actually highly recommend doing the museum this way because they do not have a lot of place cards, and you just have no context of why they're there and how they're important. After agreeing to our private tour, we followed our tour guide inside, and he started the tour off right away. First thing we see when we enter the door is the original Rosetta Stone, which I thought was really cool. And he kind of walked us through the layout of the stone and what's on it. And then from there, we just kind of weaved through the museum. The crowd wasn't as bad once we got inside the museum, and only certain major hallways were really busy. And our tour guide was great at weaving us through these crowds and getting us up close to all the really cool artifacts. They also have several mummies in this museum, and he walked us through who these people were and how they were significant to Egypt's history.
The neck to the head of the hair under the neck.
And they also had a King Tut exhibit. However, most of the things in the exhibit are copyrighted and we were not allowed to film or take pictures inside. So I just got the entrance to the exhibit. And here's some highlights of just different things we saw. I thought this was really cool. Our tour guide pulled out a bill and showed us that the statue on the bill is this exact statue. And same thing goes for this statue. And overall, this was just a really cool museum to go to. Like I said, there's a lot of really nice and interesting artifacts that I know I've seen several of them on TV, and I really enjoyed this museum. I believe it's a museum that everyone should visit when they go to Cairo. And then conveniently, there was a restaurant just outside the museum that we ended up eating lunch at. And side note, we did get a lot of veggies with all of our meals. I do not recommend eating the veggies if you are not used to eating meals in these regions. That came back to bite us in the butt later on, and I really tried not to eat a lot of them, but sometimes you couldn't avoid it. Then we hopped in another Uber and headed to a different part of the city that had several places of interest. We started out this cemetery. And make note of the man walking in front of my boss here. He comes into play in a little bit. So then we went inside of this church called St. George's Shrine. And this was a beautiful church. I really enjoyed it. And then we ran into our friend here again, and this man decided he was going to be our self-appointed tour guide. Now, this is the type of tour guide we did not want, and after constantly telling him we were not interested, he just took it upon himself to force us into a tour. So he did guide us around a bit through the area. We went to this other church nearby that was a bit smaller, and there he is again, giving us those fun facts. I can't go through there. And this is the inside of that small church. The detail inside of a lot of these churches was just crazy to me. They're all pretty much entirely hand done, and so many details down to the littlest tiles. Here he took us down to this well, and he convinced my boss and I to make the most awkward video I think I've ever made. And he made us wash our hands because he also thought we were married. We're very much not married. But he did make us take turns washing each other's hands, which made for a funny video for us. It was awkward in the moment, but we laughed about it afterwards.
This is the Egyptian lady in Egypt. Okay, the lady he washed for a man's hand. And this is holy water to be lucky. Sister, keep the camera now.
Once we graciously washed each other's hands, then we headed out of that church and we walked through the cemetery a bit more. We did eventually get rid of our tour guide, and we did end up paying him even though he forced us into the tour. It's just how it goes, and it's just kind of how things work there. We probably could have gotten out of it if we kind of pushed back a bit harder, but at the end of the day, it wasn't that big of a deal. So then we made it to a nearby church called the Hanging Church, and the reason it's called the Hanging Church is because of where it stands. It may look like it's street level. It is actually hundreds of feet above where the old ancient roads used to be. So this church is suspended on top of a structure of stilts to hold it up, which is pretty crazy, and I tried not to think about that too much while we were inside of it. It was probably one of the most beautiful churches we had been in thus far, and even more details than the other two we had previously been in. Here's a glimpse through the floors of how high above the original road we are. And then we decided it was time to move on. We caught an Uber back to our hotel, but our day wasn't over yet. We went back, we cleaned up, and we got ready for an evening event related to the conference we were there for. So they hosted us on a dinner boat ride where we saw several performances, such as these. And we got the chance to cruise down the Nile River, which was really cool, and we got to see Cairo at night. And that kind of wraps up our first full 2 days in Cairo. They were both free days, so we kind of chose what we got to do. In the next video, I will be wrapping up the rest of our Cairo experience, including some activities we did related to our conference. So stay tuned for the continuation of this series. Thank you for watching.